going to stop there and I'm going to introduce our very first speaker, right? So, our very first speaker is Dr. Anthony Bossis. He is a clinical psychologist and researcher at NYU School of Medicine. I actually was fortunate to meet Dr. Bossis in my very first days beginning to feel out involvement with the field. And Dr. Bossis is a psychologist. He's a clinical assistant professor of psychiatry at NYU Grossman School of Medicine and NYU Center for Psychedelic Medicine, conducting FDA-approved clinical research with psilocybin since 2009. He was the director of palliative care research and co-principal investigator on the 2016 clinical trial demonstrating a significant reduction in emotional distress from a single psilocybin session in persons with cancer. This study was truly groundbreaking and truly phenomenal, really set the stage for a lot of the work that has continued from there. Dr. Bossis has provided training, is a training supervisor of psychotherapy at NYU Bellevue Hospital, and co-founder and former co-director of the Bellevue Hospital Palliative Care Service. He is on the editorial board of the Journal of Humanistic Psychology and a guest editor with Dr. Charles Grob for the journal's special series on psychedelics. His primary psychedelic research interests are in the treatment of end-of-life existential distress and the study of consciousness, meaning, and spirituality. He also maintains a private psychotherapy practice in New York City. It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Anthony Bossis.
Good morning. Nice. Wow, humans, live humans in a room. This feels great. Like many of you, I'm sure, this is my first time out in 2 years, really. First time at an event, certainly first time speaking at an event. And it's great to be here and see you all, and I hope we continue this new phase of our life. And thank you, Horizons, for putting on this incredible conference. That's working great. It's great to be here with masks and all. And it reminds us of this incredible time we're in. It's been extraordinary. And I think it dovetails to what we're talking about this weekend. This is some unique zeitgeist we're in. Seems like some inflection point in our species, maybe, as so many things are coming up. Climate change, trying to increase our awareness about inequity, political upheaval, and this virus that has really pulled the curtain back on what's always been there, but reminded us that this life is precious, fleeting, impermanent. It's easy to push that stuff away as we busy ourselves through the world. But it also reminds us of some, the grace there is that it reminds us that we are truly interconnected and truly interdependent. And why is that? Why would that be? Why would nature wire us to be so interdependent? And I think this time has allowed us to, let me just take my watch off so I know how much time I have here. I think has offered an opportunity to revisit how we live and how we live in certain areas. And one of them, I think, is how we heal each other and how we heal ourselves and what that looks like. And that's where psychedelic medicine and therapy has profound promise. Today we're going to hear a lot about these incredible clinical trials going on. A word of caution, we're still in clinical trials for the most part for psilocybin, MDMA, ketamine, which we'll hear about, is out in the world. And it's a remarkable time. How do I advance this? Let's see. Great. So does this model really provide an opportunity for a paradigm shift in healthcare? It really seems that the promise is there. These medicines, and more importantly, these medicine-generated experiences that we're wired for, and again, why is that? I might say why is that a lot today. We're wired for these transcendent, meaning-making experiences and consciousness that when done in the proper set and setting, proper context, proper tradition, allow for almost a self-healing, allow for us to learn and cultivate insights and enduring change. Why would that be? How could these clinical trials and these medicines harness that experience, tap into that experience for therapeutic gain as well? Throughout the weekend, you'll hear about many medicines and different clinical indications, but at the heart of it, of many of the protocols, is this psilocybin therapy model, built upon great giants from the first wave of research in the 1950s and 60s. And the experience itself has always been known to humanity. It's part of who we are. It's our birthright, some say. And we are a debt to the first researchers and also to indigenous cultures and where these medicines have lived throughout our civilization. Most tools we have in the healthcare toolbox, most pharmacotherapies, quiet down symptoms, and they're useful, as is psychotherapy, very useful. But they quiet down symptoms that are uncomfortable, and that's important. But these medicines, and more importantly, these medicine-generated experiences allow participants, allow patients to explore the underpinnings of the suffering. Not just quiet down the symptoms of distress, but cultivate insight as to maybe the nature of the suffering and a variety of indications. And that's incredible. That's incredible. And the other possibility is, can these medicine-generated experiences provide insights into the nature of meaning and human consciousness? Why are we wired for these incredible, transcendent, meaning-making experiences? Why is that? You know. It's incredible. And clinical medicine can begin to work in this area is also incredible. And it allows also opportunity for a lot of other applications, including interreligious dialogue and into spiritual faith. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about this model that is the heart of what we're talking about this week and these trials. First, show a few features of the model, then dive a little deeper into it. For every patient in these trials, there's a very careful medical and psychological screening. There's consent to be in the trial. There's importantly this preparation and guidelines for safety, period. I'm going to talk more about it in a moment. And it's crucial, the context, the preparation, the session itself, the integration, the context it's nested within, versus just giving a medicine to cause change. It's a paradigm shift in healthcare. People take this medicine once, maybe twice, two of these experiences, and it can alleviate years of complex, often treatment-resistant clinical disorders. And that's remarkable. Then there's the medicine session itself that we'll talk about a bit. And importantly, integration, support, and follow-up. This is the heart of most of the clinical trials you'll hear about today. You'll also hear about the neuroscience following my talk. But this model seems tried and true. And again, I want to just credit the gratitude to the pioneers of the first wave who developed this model back at Spring Grove. So this first period is really important, this first phase, the sense of preparation, where two therapists or two guides or a guide, there's not a good word for that, or a sitter, forms an alliance with the participant and develops trust and rapport, crucial to the outcome of the studies. That trust and rapport has been shown to really buffer against adverse effects. And even during tough stretches of the experience itself, that alliance, that assurance, that trust and rapport helps the participant navigate sometimes very difficult encounters within. There's the set and setting that we're going to focus on throughout the weekend. Set, the mindset of the person, what brings them to the study, to the experience. The setting, how it's done, where it's done, the proper environment. Intention, why is the person doing it? Intention dictates outcome. And while we can't predict what will happen in any session, we could provide some guidelines for how to address, how to move into the unfolding changes in consciousness for the person within these experiences. To know that everything that's coming up is coming up in your mind, in consciousness, to trust consciousness, trust the inherent wisdom within, trust the therapist in the room, and move into each unfolding change as it arises, even the most challenging of experiences, to move into it. We've rarely seen experiences when you move into it, it doesn't change to a teachable and insightful experience. And the empathic support of the team forms a model for the participant, for the patient, to move into things with trust. And everything is coming up for some particular reason. And again, the mechanism of action is different from any other medication being used today. Most medications people are on, maybe many of us are on today, work as you take the medicine daily to achieve the desired effect. What a paradigm shift with this model, with these clinical trials, and the promise that a medicine can generate an experience and consciousness that we seem wired for, that seems to be who we are in our essence in part. And by experiencing that landscape, there could be insights to radically change the root of suffering. It's a radical shift in therapeutics. It really is a paradigm shift. And after that preparation period it could vary from days to weeks. In our first trial, we met with them for 3 or 4 weeks, which was lovely. It's an important time to develop that rapport. Then there's the medicine session. This is a picture of our first room at NYU. Feels like ancient history already. Of our first cancer trial. And it's in a hospital, but you see it's a very pleasant living room-like setting, close to a living room-like setting. With a very nice rug. A very nice rug is mandatory for all psychedelic sessions. As I often joke, we blew half the budget on the rug. They made a mistake to give me the credit card and go into the city to buy a rug, and it was, but it's important. This is actually a day of a session, so in the weeks prior to the session, two therapists are meeting with the participant in this room, developing their rapport, providing guidelines for safety, what might arise, and how to meet it, how to trust it, how to accept it. And the day of the session, we see the couch is now made into a bed for the day, and the patient hadn't arrived yet on this day. And there's a 6 to 8 hour session where the participant is encouraged to wear headphones that plays a 6-hour track of music and eye shades. And the point of all that, of course, is to encourage an inward direction, to distract from this consensus reality, and to go into the unfolding changes in consciousness, like we would in a mindfulness of Vipassana meditation. 2 therapists are there throughout the day to provide guidance if needed. In some sessions, the patient isn't talking at all. We're checking in periodically to make sure they're safe and they're not in some kind of distress. We're checking on medical signs and vitals. And if they need to, we're there to talk with them. But most likely, we're encouraging them to be with the experience. No need to report to us on what's happening. And we have plenty of time to talk that evening and the days that follow. These sessions vary, as everyone here knows, in their experiences, from incredibly blissful and an incredible sense of an encounter with love or bliss, and also profoundly challenging experiences as we have the encounter with self, as Jung would say. And for those who are depressed, or those at the end of life, or those suffering with various clinical disorders or types of suffering, it can be quite painful. And we're there to encourage, to explore, and to learn within the experience. And what research has shown over the past 70 years is that there is an experience, the mystical or peak experience, that seems to provide, when endorsed, this better clinical outcome. Out of Johns Hopkins and now NYU and elsewhere, when this experience has been endorsed by the participants, it's been correlated with better outcomes in these clinical trials. And the key features of this experience are unity, a subjective sense of all things interconnected, interdependent, through this transcendent state. The noetic quality, a term coined by William James, that is, if one has encountered an ultimate reality. People rarely, I've never heard a patient say, that was a temporary drug effect. It's more like, that was a glimpse into ultimate reality, or a part of reality. That felt more real than this. Why is that? Sacredness, sense of awe, wonder, humility. Deeply felt positive moods, such as love, that we're going to talk about in a moment, that we hear so much about. Also, there are tough stretches and tough experiences within that. It isn't all peaches and cream, as I try to remember to say. ineffability, impossible to describe. It transcends language. Although I have to say, as you all know, our participants have remarkable capacities to keep beautiful journals and write these experiences down. I'll read to you a few quotes in today's brief talk. And transcendence, which I think is such a remarkable part of this experience. This capacity to transcend this body of ours, time and space as we know it, to pull the lens back on experience. One of the first trials we did that remains close to my heart and the work that I'm dedicated to is working with those at the end of life. And for a patient whose body is beginning to fail and will soon stop working, the insight that I'm more than this one body, that I'm more than my cancer, there's something more enduring about whatever I am. What a profound gift to provide to patients. To pull the lens back and see us in a much larger landscape that recalibrates sometimes our perspectives on the nature of suffering and self and even death. Why is that? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote, "Healing is the personal experience of the transcendence of suffering." And we know that transcendence and meaning-making are profoundly important coping mechanisms for humanity, just to be here on this earth. And these medicines seem to provide both. That seems to provide the rationale for all our research. These medicine-generated experiences provide a profound sense of transcendent and meaning-making. And again, studies have shown that this experience has been correlated with better clinical outcomes and reductions in depression and anxiety. And there are other experiences as well. It's not all, there are a variety of experiences, not just one, of course. There are incredible opportunities for life review, to revisit past relational conflicts and opportunities for forgiveness for maybe conflicts and traumas from 50 years prior, all within the nature of this incredibly altered state of consciousness that we call the mystical or peak state. It has many names. Jung called it the numinosity. And none of this is new. Well, before I get to that, to quote who I think was a modern-day mystic, the great Albert Einstein said, "The most beautiful and profound emotion we can experience is the sensation of the mystical. It is the fundamental emotion that stands at the cradle of true art and true science." And in 1962, this experience was first documented in the trial. The great Walter Pahnke at Marsh Chapel gave psilocybin to 10 theology students as placebo to the other 10. And it turned out the ones with psilocybin had this mystical experience as now measured by a questionnaire we call the MEQ, the Mystical Experience Questionnaire. And many years later, in 2006, Hopkins replicated that trial with healthy volunteers and again found that the psilocybin group had a largely robust experience of that mystical peak state. And none of this is new. The medicines aren't new. Some are new. Some were discovered in the last century. And some have been around for millennia. And the experiences aren't new. That seems to be, that's always been there. Never began, will never end. That seems to be something that's been there. And we see it in the Mayan culture going back to 1000 BC. We see it in the Rig Veda, mentions of Soma and its capacity to transcend. We see it in the Greek Eleusinian mysteries. For 2,000 years of these mysteries, people like Plato and others drank a substance called kykeon. I'm a proud Greek. And which we believe was an ergot alkaloid that provided the insight into these, a glimpse into something different. Of course, the Native American church and the use of peyote. And to just drive home the point, these experiences also are naturally occurring. Mystic saints and everyday people. There's a recent Pew study showing 49% of Americans report a religious or spiritual awakening, this experience. Hopkins did a wonderful study comparing psychedelic-generated mystical experience with naturally occurring. And you see the similar features that both groups endorsed. So naturally occurring by spontaneity, by grace, by music, by dancing, by being in the woods, by making love, and by these medicines. So as I said, meaning-making and self-transcendence are crucial to so much of this healing, to pull the lens back and see ourselves in a different perspective, to learn new ways of living. And I was very grateful and fortunate to be involved in the first clinical trials with cancer patients. I still believe in that the application for palliative care and to ease the suffering that we all have about the end of this brief and fleeting and precious life is a profound gift to humanity. And we're starting new trials in palliative care and psilocybin, which is really crucial. In our cancer trials is one of the indications, after one dose of psilocybin, more importantly, after one experience in that landscape, in that mystical peak experience, in that through the doorway, as Aldous Huxley called it, we saw dramatic reductions, instant dramatic reductions in depression, anxiety, demoralization, which is an awful experience for the end-of-life patient, hopelessness. We saw improvements in existential well-being and quality of life. And again, we saw this personally meaningful and spiritually significant experience. Viktor Frankl, who I hope you all know, Holocaust survivor and who developed logotherapy, a meaning-making psychotherapy, said, "Meaning can be found in life literally up to the last moment, up to the last breath, even in the face of death." A few quotes from people in the cancer trial. Many of these people have since passed away. "This changed my life. I can't imagine it," referring to her fear of cancer. "I felt this constant state of becoming. I felt gratitude like I never felt before in my life. I felt totally welcome." And that was always amazing. People with no experience in altered states or with these medicines were apprehensive naturally. It would be normal to be anxious going into it. And then you get this sense of, I was welcome, I was okay. It was difficult, but I knew I was safe, and this is part of who I am. Death doesn't matter from a person approaching death. Less afraid of death, death is part of life. This is a person who was in remission, but was crippled by fear of recurrence. And that just was mitigated. They feel that one is eternal. These people speak like mystics. And everything is love. And we hear that a lot. It's always interesting if you hear scientists talk about love all the time, but that's what they're telling us they're experiencing. A profound loving kindness towards self and forgiveness for all the shortcomings in their life. For people in their lives, throughout their lifespan, people offering forgiveness for conflicts and resentments for 50 years. And of a greater love, I like to use the Greek word agape, that somehow, whatever all this is somehow made up of some incredible phenomena called love. That is the ground of being, to paraphrase Paul Tillich. Aldous Huxley, in a letter to Humphrey Osmond, the great Canadian psychiatrist who did the first research, wrote to him, "What came through the closed door was the realization, not the knowledge, for this wasn't verbal or abstract, but direct total awareness from the inside, to say, of love as the primary and fundamental cosmic fact." I'm going to read you another quick quote from a participant. 4.5 years later, our team did a paper with the survivors of the trial. Many had passed away, but the survivors were recontacted and interviewed again. And one of the things a person said 4.5 years later about her experience. "There's a reckoning which came with cancer, and this reckoning was enhanced by the psilocybin experience. I have a greater appreciation and gratitude for being alive. Once the thought of cancer is part of your life, it becomes woven into the fabric of your being. You realize that this, or something similar, awaits many others who are unsuspecting. This compels you to relate to others from the perspective of compassion. Due to the changeable and temporary nature of our sense of who we are, radical change is just around the corner, regardless of how certain we are of our current state. It's all changing. Every moment it's changing. What's it changing into? We are children in our understanding of life until something reaches deep into your heart and announces itself. I understand the life process to be one of realization of our divine nature. This does not include a supernatural creature, but a process of remembrance. The experience reinforced the understanding that we all are very much together in this. In the end, the feeling was one of love." The great Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen monk, wrote, "Our true nature is the nature of no birth and no death. Only when we touch our true nature can we transcend the fear of non-being, the fear of annihilation." Is that what these experiences are touching into? Our patients seem to report experiences like this. And these aren't, as I've said a few times, I hope I said it, just medicine-generated experiences. They're naturally occurring. And one of the ways they occur, which hopefully one day some of us will get to experience, is to be in space. Astronauts report the overview effect. Seeing this little pale blue dot, as the great Carl Sagan calls it, floating around a ball of fire. And that's our home. And Edgar Mitchell, on the way back from Apollo 14, had a mystical or peak experience. I don't think he had LSD on the spacecraft that day. And he wrote a lot about it, but looking at the spacecraft window on the way back home, he writes, on a return trip, gazing through 240,000 miles of space toward the stars and the planet from which I had come, I suddenly realized the universe as intelligent, loving, and harmonious. Suddenly I realized that the molecules of my body, of my co-astronauts, were manufactured, prototyped in some ancient generation of stars. There was an overwhelming sense of oneness, of connectedness. It wasn't just me, or us and them. It was all one. An insight, oh God, an epiphany. Oh, we're home. So, can these medicine-generated experiences, these clinical trials, move towards the next step? We hope so. There are so many exciting applications you're going to hear about today. Treatment of addiction, anxiety, PTSD, end-of-life distress, depression, smoking cessation, so many applications, and so many novel ones people are offering up. It provides a method to study the phenomenology of this experience and the neurobiology, which you can hear about in a few minutes. Does it have implications for interreligious dialogue? If we truly are all interconnected, just one unfolding fabric of the sameness, how do we hurt one another or kill one another? What are the implications of these experiences? And what does it say about human consciousness? Is that just generated by this remarkable, complex brain function, or is it even more remarkable than that? Is it somehow in part outside biology? What is all this? Where are we? Can these tools in some way provide some insight into at least the human aspect of consciousness? Are we wired for meaning? What is enduring? And why? In closing, I want to just mention a quote from Albert Hoffman, who discovered LSD in 1938. He wrote, alienation from nature and the loss of experience of being part of the living creation is the greatest tragedy of the materialistic era. Therefore, I attribute absolute highest importance to consciousness change. I regard psychedelics as catalyzers for this. They are tools which guide our perception toward deeper areas of human existence, so that again we become aware of our spiritual essence. These are existential medicines, spiritual medicines. These clinical trials are so unique. To see FDA clinical trials tapping into this experience, we're profoundly lucky. Psychedelics, he continued, in a safe setting, can help our consciousness open up to this connection of being one with nature. It is my great concern to separate psychedelics from the ongoing debates about drugs and to highlight the tremendous inherent potential in these substances for self-awareness, as an adjunct in therapy, and for research into the human mind. Like the NASA astronauts, we're all seekers and exploring. We're at our best when seeking, when exploring new discoveries in worlds out there, in the cosmos, and in worlds within. We're at our best when we collaborate to try to heal one another and to heal this very fragile planet, this pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan called it. We seek to understand our true human potential, and now more than ever do we need to understand that. What an inflection point we're at. Is that why these medicines have returned in some way? These trials exist, and the future of this field hopefully expands. What a time. What a time we're in. What a unique opportunity. Through ancient wisdom and modern science, we seek truth and knowledge. We're seekers. We really seek. We're at our best when trying to find out who we really are, what we're capable of. And with determination, courage, and maybe a little grace and luck, we'll eventually get there. Thank you for listening. Boy, oh boy. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Truly fascinating.